going to be spoken that's going to help you set some boundaries to let you know whether you have the proper boundaries or you do not. But I am excited about what's going to take place. Now, if you remember last week, I said that you can draw a line in the sand. You remember that? And so when I said draw a line in the sand, some of you, because of the friction or the frustration or the anger that was coming about you drawing the line in the sand, you kept drawing another line. Mhm. And so every time you drew another line because of what was happening. Well, what happens when you draw the line and you keep drawing a line, but there's some agitators out there that want to see you fight, that want to see you scrapple? What happens when they throw shade? What happens when they egg the crowd on? What happens? What do you do when they throw some sand just to get the fight started? How do you handle that, panel? Panel.
Well, for me, they tell me boundaries supposed to be peaceful. But in setting those boundaries, sometimes it's not peaceful, especially when you got other people egging it on that ain't got nothing to do with it, but they got to put their little 5 cent worth in and try to sway it one way or the other.
Panel.
The old me would have had to go ahead and go at it because both of us, if both of us was in the middle, whoever, and it was a situation and they was like, well, she said this and she said that, and you back and forth and you cross that line, because that's the way it used to be when I was growing up. We was fighting. But the new me can walk away.
Is that because you set some boundaries for yourself?
I did.
We'll talk about that.
I would say that you have to, because again, like the old me, I would be ready to like fight, go at it, and try to defend myself. But I think most of the time we try to defend ourselves because we want to prove to people, okay, that's not how we are. But we can prove that by walking away, by letting you have that, because truth will speak for itself anyways. Like if you know you're not that type of person, well, how you represent yourself, how you walk, that'll show people within themselves like, okay, well, she really not like how they're trying to present her. So boundaries is being able to say, okay, I can set that. I don't have to react to that because I know who I am and I'm confident and true to who I am, so that it'll speak for itself.
And that used to be the only way I knew how to set a boundary was through violence. Do it again, Bush.
Do it again, I'm going to bust you.
That's the only way I knew how to set a boundary.
Okay.
Because people just don't have that respect. Well, I'm gonna leave it alone.
Okay.
Well, as a man of God, what I understand today about boundaries is that boundaries are biblically ordained, and so God has, because I belong to God, certain boundaries are on my life anyway. So therefore, when I set a boundary, it's never to challenge anyone. My boundaries are set so that I don't forget who I am and who I belong to.
Much of what's been spoken speaks more specifically to emotional intelligence. The first quadrant in the 4 quadrants of emotional intelligence is self-awareness. Some of you spoke about, now that I know more about me and who I am in this space as a Christian, things I did before, but now I don't do. That speaks to self-awareness. And what that allows you to do is to be able to understand, to recognize and understand not only the emotions that you have, but those of other people and how they show up in those spaces. So for someone who is drawing a line in the sand, and then another, that person is egging it on, there are some things there that are happening even before we get to the conversation of boundaries. And it's about self-awareness. And then it's also about self-management. It's, it kind of goes on that allows you to be able to put a boundary in place and not allow it to be so porous to where you keep going back and back and back. Because at some point you're going to get backed into a corner. And what one of my co-panelists said, you're going to come out fighting. And you're going to think, you know what, the only way you're going to understand what I mean or what I said is for me to lay hands on you. And that is when that emotional intelligence has to kick in to say, that's not who I am. That's not the person I want to be described as, because our personality don't belong to us. It's given to us according to our interactions and our activities with other people. So we have, I think, to answer that question, we also have to include emotional intelligence to say, I have to be self-aware. I have to understand me in order to put something in place and then enforce it, because I've given some critical thought to what that looks like and how that's going to pan out.
So when you say that I want to lay hands on you, we do recognize that that's not biblical, right? I'm not getting ready to lay spiritual hands on you. And so it does mean that I need to be aware of my surroundings. I need to be aware of who I am. I need to be aware of what I have become so that I do not fall prey to the tricks that are trying to draw me or lure me into a place that I don't need to be in. Does that make any sense? And so those are my boundaries. Well, when I deal with that, knowing what I believe boundaries are, then let me ask this question. We're going to talk about good in and bad out. What is good in? And please tell me, before we get to bad out, make sure that my good and my bad are not the same thing, because that's what I want to know. Because if my good and my bad is the same thing, then have I really set proper boundaries, or do I even know what boundaries are? So what is my good in? Let's go there first.
So for me, I'm gonna say for me, good in is anything that will help you grow, help you get to a different place, that can help you mature, that can help you like flourish, that will really be good for you as a person. Majority of the time though, we do get our good in and bad out mixed up because of what we've experienced through life, and it becomes a mix up. So we'll take more of the bad in and keep the good off, because it's no longer a boundary we have set, it's become a wall.
Okay, so just before we do that, we have a silent partner that would like to speak.
Yes, I just wanted to throw in that when I hear about bad in and good out, or good in and bad out, I think about the word that says to me that what goes into a man does not defile him, but what comes out of a man defileth him. And that's my thought. It doesn't really matter if what goes into you is good or bad. It really doesn't matter. It could be anything. But if what you express from that, what your heart has in it and your lips will speak it, that is what will defile you if what you're saying is sinful. Put it like that.
Mm-hmm.
And to bring more light to that particular statement, when we're talking about good in and bad out, we have to consider our emotions that deal with when something happens to me, how it goes in. The difference is whether I respond to it, meaning I'm giving thought, I'm analyzing, I'm being critical, or whether I react and I'm only going off of my emotions, because some of what I heard you talk about was about being defensive, trying to protect yourself. And if that's the understanding that you believe you have based on things that have happened to you, then it may be more reactionary. It may be more impulsive. It may be more of consequences, negative that is, that you experience. And that's that bad, I think, that the elder is speaking of. It wasn't so much that I grew up in a particular neighborhood. It was how I took that information and manipulated it and made it work for me, to now I'm resilient, to now I have leadership skills. So it's about that. It's about perspective. It's about lenses. It's about all those things.
So let me say this. It says boundaries help us to distinguish our property so that we can take care of it. That's what boundaries do. It helps us to distinguish our property. Am I property? And whose property do I belong to? And what do I do with that property? Yes, sir.
I was anxious. I'm sorry. Anyway, because yes, you are someone's property. I consider myself God's property. I used to consider myself my own property. And one of the things that God gave us an example of boundaries in the book of Genesis. He set the boundaries. He gave Adam and Eve free reign in the garden, except for one thing, that boundary. And they violated that boundary. And when they violated that boundary, instead of taking responsibility for that boundary, they blamed someone else. God, because we belong to God, and because self-control is a fruit of the Spirit, we should be practicing that as Christians. I should know that I belong to God. And so the boundaries I've set for me are to keep out the bad and to keep in the good.
Go ahead.
So I think the term good and bad is relative.
Okay.
I would like to suggest that what we generalize a lot of our language, and we even generalize the word of God sometimes. And when we do that, we make it work for us. Boundaries are just what they are, whether they are according to the word of God, according to your mental health, according to your physical health. They are in place, and only your experience will determine the goodness or the bad about it. So what I may have a boundary for that I consider bad, someone else may say, well, that's not a problem for me, so that's not bad, right? This is something I have a problem for. So I want, moving forward, I would like to suggest that that be a part of the understanding that when we're talking about good in and bad out, that it's relative to the person. Because I haven't experienced domestic violence. So it may not be a boundary for me that when someone raises their voice, that's a non-negotiable, right? Someone gets close up in my face and starts yelling at me, that's a non-negotiable. That may not be, personal space may not be a boundary for me because I don't have that experience. Personal space could actually be something that rewards me. So we have to just understand what good and bad is. Does that support the conversation?
It supports. Yes, ma'am.
I was gonna say that like we do belong to God. I think we have to learn to tell ourselves that it's important to speak truth to ourselves. It's important to speak life to ourselves because the Bible says that we are his temple. But if we don't treat it as such, of course, it's going to be a reflection of however we may treat ourselves. But you have to speak life into yourself because power is in your tongue. I mean, most of the time we take, again, what she said, like we take what we've experienced from our environment, and sometimes that can be detrimental to you. Sometimes it can be, encouraging for you. But if somebody's always speaking badly to you, you're gonna think that's good because you're gonna think, okay, I need to receive that for somebody to show me that they love me. But when you come into an understanding that that's not really love, then you're like, okay, something clicks. And you're like, okay, I can no longer accept that because it's not proper love being shown to me. So it's just about being able to understand who you are and how he sees you.
So those seeds that are being sown, and they can be negative seeds, yes?
Yeah.
And so because they're negative seeds, the way you receive them and what you process with them causes it to be good or bad. And so if I set a boundary for myself that basically deals with, how about sweets? I set a boundary for myself with sweets. That has nothing to do with someone that doesn't have a problem with eating a lot of sugar. But if my makeup in my body says that eating too many sweets takes my sugar levels too high, So what I just put in my body, was it a bad thing or a good thing? I should have set a boundary. And just because I'm in your presence and you're eating it, does it mean that I need to eat it too? Is that a problem? Is that a situation? Is that an issue? What is that? I just had to provoke something, please.
Well,
Right.
me being an addict, I have to set them boundaries. Because like you say, somebody else having a glass of wine after dinner is fine, you know. But for me, I know if I take that one sip, ain't no telling what's gonna happen. It's not that it's the wine, it's just how my body reacts to it. Now, it don't bother you. I remember when me and my wife were dating, she could have one drink and be through. But I could. I could not. You know, I'm like, let's hurry up and go. The liquor store gonna close. I need to get something else to drink. You know, so I have to keep that in mind as a boundary. When I'm in a situation, I can't tell other people not to drink.
Mhm.
You know, unless it's at my house. You know, I can figure out, even at my house, it's not inside. Y'all go over there by the garage. Sometimes you look at all the red cups over here and all the yellow cups over there. Because you know the red cups is alcohol, the yellow cups is lemonade. But, you know, I have to set those boundaries as to where I go, the thoughts I entertain, the conversation I listen to, because it's not good for me.
Okay, Dr. Lee.
He took what I was going to say because it's not the thing that's bad. It's how you react to the thing, right? So you can eat that. It's just how is your body going to react to it? And I wanted to say something to what he said about the thoughts. Boundaries can go around our thoughts as well. We have to, when we know that we're in a particular situation or feeling a certain way, we don't want to turn on Teddy Pendergrass when we are having some challenges with being alone. You said you wanted to
Turn out the light.
yeah, turn them off, you know.
And light a candle.
Come on, baby.
So boundaries can go around thoughts as well. It's not just those things that are tangible, but they're intangible things as well, because we're humans and we have experiences and we have needs. And how do we put things in place? Like he said, if I know that this is where they're going to serve alcohol, or if this is the conversation that may lead to alcohol, I need to know what activate me. I need to, you probably hear the word trigger. It's not my favorite word. I prefer activation. And that can be a discussion in and of itself. But you have to know what it is that activate certain things in you. Because if I were to ask you to close your eyes and I start talking about, how to make this particular cake and it's your favorite cake, your mouth is going to start watering.
Mhm.
But if I tell you to close your eyes and cut a lemon and squeeze it into a glass and then drink it, what's going to happen? It's going to be a whole nother effect, right?
Exactly.
So it's about what you're also hearing that can invoke some things. So you don't need to get when going back to what you said, when you know who you are and whose you are, I want to focus more when you know who you are, not to negate God's presence in any of our lives, but you have to know who you are, because then you can submit to him and say, look, now this is how I talk to God. I'm not encouraging anybody else. I'd be like, look, your word said, so I'm waiting on you to do something, right? I need you told me if I come to you and cast my cares upon you, I've casted them. Now, what in it? I do that.
Mhm.
But I think when we have the language, we're better able to establish things, because then we know from the beginning to the end. We have permissive will too now.
True. And so that thought that came up, if I continue to dwell on it, it causes me problems later, because I already knew that it wasn't really where I should have been. I already knew that's not where I really want to be. But then if I continue to go down that road, then I can say, Uh-huh.
I've fallen and I can't get up.
But it's a possibility. I've been really trying, baby. Oh, trying to hold back them feelings. Oh, sorry. So we go into a place that we really didn't want to go into, but we did because we didn't gather those thoughts and put them in the place that they should have been. So I see several. 1, 2, and 3. Yes.
Not so much that we didn't gather those thoughts as we did not adhere to our own personal boundary. I have where I stay, the person that I pay rent to owns a little club, and it's a little nightclub, a little social club, and right next to it is a gentleman's club. And I noticed that when I would go by there to take my rent, I would think about, wonder what's happening in the club. I know what's happening in the club. And you know what I said to her? I will cash app you your money from now on. Because I know me. And I know I have to set boundaries for me. And that's what I think you were saying earlier, is that boundaries are neither good nor bad. Your boundaries are personal. They have to reflect our activation process and be aware. They should let us, they're us telling ourselves, if this, then maybe that. And we don't want that. So keep this in place.
Yes, sir.
And as Dr. Tanya was saying, that awareness of who you are and that self-acceptance of who you are. You know, as an addict, sometimes I say, well, I'm an addict. Don't say that. You ain't no addict, but I know that I am. And I know what's going to happen if I forget that.
Yes, ma'am.
Something that was said earlier, he was talking about how, like, you know, if he was to go to, he was talking about if he go to somebody else's house, he can't really control what they do within their house because it's their house. But when he's at his house, he can control what goes on, what doesn't happen. And I think most of the time with our boundaries, like, we're trying to control other people because we want them to be a certain way in our mind. And that's how we mess up. That's how we do fall, because I mean, God tells us truth about everything. He tells us the reality about, okay, this is how a person is, because he knows a person's heart better than we do. We just looking at the outward side like, God, you know, they fine and they look real good to my eyes and they telling me everything I want to hear to my ears. And that's how we, most of the time, our boundaries get out of place, because we're like, okay, I want to just make a person be who I am, regardless of what we're being told, because we don't want to face that true reality. Okay, this is just how a person is. They're not going to respect anything I put in place, no matter how many times I said it. They're going to always try to go around it, go over it, go underneath it, whatever they can, because they want me to get out of, okay, she this way, so I need to just do whatever I can so she can get to where I want her to be.
Did she not just shift in her seat? Which means swallow 2 times first and then breathe.
So I heard a lot. And it sounds like one of the areas there is we have to, part of that self-awareness, part of knowing who you are is also knowing what it is you're looking for from that person.
Mhm.
Boundaries are oftentimes permeated, broken, destroyed, just kicked to the curb because we believe that person can really give us something that, whether we intentionally know what it is or unconsciously know what it is. There's a story in the beginning of that book. You remember the lady?
Yes.
Who she was able to sew, and at the last minute her child's school asked her to make all these costumes. Now, she did not have the time. She worked full time and everything, but she wanted to be liked and accepted. She wanted her child to stand out and be acknowledged. And so she set herself on fire to keep all of those other people warm.
Mhm.
Go ahead. I put it out there for you.
Yeah, it's so crazy that you said it because I was having a similar conversation about that earlier. But as I was at home, God was really dealing with me on something about people pleasing. It's in Galatians when Paul was like, "Am I a man pleaser? Am I a God pleaser?" And many of the times, like we want to please so many people because we want to see them happy, we want to see them better, we want to see them do that and other, but we're trying to please them because we want them to like us, we don't want them to hate us, we don't want them to feel no type of way about us, but we damage so much of ourselves that like when we come back to God, it's like, God, I'm a mess, but we could have prevented that mess had we did what was pleasing for God and not for man.
So what you're saying to me is this, is that in me knowing who I am, then I do not have to compromise who I am. All people want to be validated. All people want to be appreciated. All people want to be honored. They want that. But at what cost? At what cost to you or to someone else? At what cost? And that's what we have to be able to understand, that there is a cost to compromise. To yourself,
You are absolutely correct.
is it?
There is definitely a cost to not adhering to your boundaries. When you don't adhere to your boundaries, you set yourself up for whatever consequence that may come as a result of you not adhering to your boundaries. Because those boundaries, you put them in place for a reason. If you forget about that reason you put them in place and you go ahead and go on beyond that boundary, you're going to probably feel the wrath of whatever it was you were trying to avoid by first establishing that boundary.
Part of the wrath that you're speaking to, I would like to suggest, is shame and guilt.
Mhm.
Because you put that in place because you were trying to protect you. Boundaries are about protecting you. They are not about protecting other people. Boundaries show up even in places that we probably won't want to talk about tonight, and that is parenting.
Mhm.
And we're seeing some of those consequences in today's society. It's not a blame, it's just a consequence of what has not been surveyed and adhered to.
Exactly. And when that happens, that's the fruit of your labor or lack of, because of what has been done and what was not done. And we have to understand that. Yes, I'm gonna let you two talk because I want to say a couple other things. Go ahead. Was it you? Okay, go ahead.
And for me, I always had trouble respecting boundaries because I thought boundaries was controlling and manipulative. You only setting that boundary so you can get me to behave or act this way that puts you in control. That's why I always had a slight problem respecting boundaries, because I thought it was a control issue.
Yes, ma'am.
I was just gonna say, this is the thing with me.
It's on.
People will have you when you set boundaries thinking you're selfish. They'll call you selfish because you set some boundaries. And I tell people, don't get lost in trying to fix somebody else, because I don't know about everybody else, but I automatically think, I gotta help him. God would want me to help him, but he ain't told me to move, but I want to help him. And then I get lost in that situation, and then and they don't even come out of it, but I be done lost myself trying to fix that situation. So then when you start saying, okay, I got this, I got to build myself back up and get myself right. And when you trying to build yourself back up right, and you hang around different people, and you are around people that speaking positivity in your life, and you set boundaries, then they come out the woodwork. You so selfish. You don't want to help nobody. You just think about you all the time. And I tell people it's okay to think about you. You can think about you.
All right, Dr. Lee. Everybody swallow twice and take a deep breath.
You don't play poker.
Again, I'm hearing we have something in that fight when we allow our boundaries to be broken. In the example that was shared a few moments ago, the need to help is one of those personality experiences that says, when I can help someone along the way, we take it way over here, because getting lost in helping someone is not what that means. Again, going back to the part about being clear about what your purpose is and what the purpose of that relationship is what's going to help boundaries to stay in place. Oftentimes, the mission goes from them to us. And that's the thing that changes. And it's not us in protecting us, it's us in getting something. I'll use the example about the addiction since it's in this space. The first time you have that experience, that sets you on fire for the next and the next and the next, right? And at that point, you may get involved in a situation, but the goal is to get that fix. And that person may be you may be thinking, I'm in this relationship. That person, I'm sorry, may be thinking you're in this relationship and you cool, but at the same time, no, I'm cool with you. You just got something I need. And that's where the manipulation comes in, because I know I can come back to you because I figured out what your hit is.
So would that bring up casting my pearls before swine?
Well,
What did we say? Well, would that bring up casting my pearls before swine? Because I need to know, is that what that's about? If I started out operating a certain way and I done went way over here, knowing that where my eyes open when I went in there.
sometimes that's not the case, though. Sometimes it's not that your eyes are wide open. Sometimes what's wide open is your heart. Sometimes what's wide open is that space that hold all those emotions. And you're seeking something, but you don't even know why you're seeking it. You don't understand how this seeking spirit became a part of who you are. And it goes back to some of those things that have happened to us. And we just want to be loved. We just want to be accepted. We just want to be liked. We want to be acknowledged. We want all these things. And so we'll relax what we put in place that we know will protect us. But if I can get this, then I'll let it go this time. That's a parent saying, is you can go this time, but don't ask me no more. But that time that you said in the beginning, you cannot, right? You cannot have this. You will not do that. But the first time you say you can, but don't ask me anymore, guess what's going to happen? It's very likely you're going to get asked again because you just relaxed your boundary. You just relaxed that thing that you put in place in your mind to protect either you or your child in this parenting situation, and now you've allowed it to happen. So I know I put a whole lot in that, but remember, this is not a therapy session. This is just good conversation.
It's just good conversation, and it is really helping so many.
Yeah, and I'm not
Yes.
required to keep you in mind. I just can talk.
Yes. Yes, ma'am.
So I've gotten that script. The first time I got that scripture, I was just like, okay.
And what scripture is that?
Do not cast your pearls before swine. I
Okay.
was like, okay. But God has been giving it to me like real often this past couple of weeks. And last night I just kept looking at it. I was like, okay, what, like, God, what is it that you're trying to say? Like, what is it that this scripture really means? And I had to put it like in perspective, like the word is casting your, like the word is holy, the word is pearls. But then I thought of, he made me think about myself. Many times, like, we forget that like we're valuable, we are treasured, like all those type of things. We can forget that, and we'll put ourselves in a position where people don't appreciate us, love us, and we get damaged, we get hurt. It comes back around to like destroy us because it turns on us. And what God made me think about is how Jesus, many wanted to be within Jesus' presence. Many want to be around him, be his friend, But then when they realized that like he wasn't willing to give himself to just any and everybody, a lot of people felt some type of way about that because he was selfish. I wouldn't say selfish, but he was protective of himself. He was selfish with who he shared himself with. And I think many times we want to give too much of ourselves to the wrong people because of, again, wanting to be loved, wanting to be appreciated, because they telling us whatever we may want to hear, and we just fall prey to that.
Let me let this silent partner say something, and then we're coming back to our panel.
Yes, and the point that you're making is really what this is about. The reason we have to judge is because we are privileged to handle the holy word of God. If we treat it like it's nothing, or we treat it as if it is discardable, that we can talk to other people who don't have the spirit that we have, and we just go ahead and roll it to them, that is casting pearls before swine. And while Jesus did tell us that we have to go out and we have to make all creatures, we still have to be smart enough, use the discernment that God has given us to know when it is time, who is the right person, and how to present it. You know, even Jesus wouldn't speak to Herod because he knew his spirit wasn't right. So we have to take what God has given us and use it in such a fashion that we're able to bring people to Christ, able to win souls that are winnable and that deserve to have God's word placed in them.
Are all deserving?
No.
All are not deserving?
I think so.
I think all are deserving,
Okay.
but it may not be that I'm the one who's supposed to give it to them. I think that I have to be led by the Spirit. I think that not knowing, not being led by the Spirit sets my word up to be cast like pearls before swine.
And you were going to say?
Because he said he wished that none should perish. So you have to, I think everybody is deserving. Everybody is deserving to hear that word because it might be life changing.
Okay. Yes, ma'am.
I'd like to focus more on the word worthy.
Mhm.
Now, you all can find this in your Bible. I'm not going to tell you that I know but I know that it is in the Bible where there was a trip out to somebody's house with a container of oil,
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm.
and they were one that was worthy, correct?
Mm-hmm.
And that oil was going to do a certain thing when it happened. If we can understand that meaning of worthiness as it relates to who we are, we have inside of us, then that is a good measure of what's going on in our spaces with the people that are there. If you understand that you are worthy, then we're not seeking to be unequally yoked with someone who is not worthy of your worth. Because that is the understanding when you start talking about having awareness about relationships and being intimacy with the other person. That means that you have taken time to know you, they've taken time to know them, and together you gain this understanding and this clarity. Oftentimes that doesn't happen like that. We're not getting to that point to where we can tell, you know what, that is a bad spirit. But you know what? I'm gonna do this anyway. And we don't have that kind of dialogue in our head. We are emotional creatures, and that is what get us most often, instead of going to our mind and allowing ourselves to have that conversation about the good in and the bad out according to our own spaces.
So let me say this about good in and bad out. What does that mean when it talks about what you sow, that shall you also reap? So how's that good in and bad out? What I sow is what I also reap.
Because if I'm sowing something, okay, so this is the example that I used earlier. If I'm on Instagram, TikTok, Facebook, YouTube, and I keep sowing in my spirit or my flesh, relationships, kids, children, wanting to be with somebody. I mean, I'm gonna want to be in a relationship, do all this other stuff because like you see so much into your eyes that like you'll start bringing up desire that you really don't have within you. Like earlier I said that I've been tested in some areas regarding relationships, and I was just like, as people have come, I realized that I don't really want a relationship, but the desire came from what I sold into my eyes and what went within my heart. So I was just like, okay, I want this. This is what I want. But in true reality it's not that I wanted it because it was an actual want. It's just something that I fed myself so much that it became like a want or a need, should I say.
So what was the need or the want that you desired and didn't have the language to communicate to yourself?
I guess wanting to be loved by somebody.
And did we not love ourselves first?
Yes. I think the thing is for me is that like you'll get in a place for I don't know, I could just speak for me, but me being young, you'll get in a place of feeling like, okay, like I'm not where I need to be. I see so many people doing this, that, and the other, and then you'll become discontent with where you are as a person.
So sometimes, if I can say this, and then Dr. Lee, sometimes I believe that we can be so overwhelmed because of what we're trying to accomplish. We did not take the time to do one thing at a time. Now, there are times that we can do multiple things, but when you realize that you are in so many areas of your life and you have so many irons in the fire, sometimes it's good to step back and prioritize. Put some boundaries in place so that you don't become overwhelmed. But when you do become overwhelmed, I believe that's when you feel like I need to be loved. I need to be validated, appreciated, because you have given so much of yourself. But who did that? I just want to know. Was it me, you, them? Because I think we can have control over that. I think you were getting ready to say something.
I was going to comment about the wanting to be loved, and that is a great step when you understand what supports your actions. The next step, and I won't label it as the best step, but the next step too is to understand how that became. How did that become that you felt you needed or you wanted to be loved? Does that speak to you not having it, you having an experience where it was the opposite of that? Or you, because sometimes when we use the word love, it doesn't come with a handbook. It comes with TV, Snapchat, Facebook, Instagram, Mamagram, Daddygram, Cousingram. I mean, it comes with all those things. And I heard some of that in the conversation about I was looking somewhere else instead of looking into me. Because part of that intimacy is you looking into you and understanding who really am I? Who am I really? What makes me who I am? What are my needs? What are my wants? How did they become those things for me? Because if that is the lack of knowledge that's in the place, then it's easy for someone else to tell you the answer that they believe is best for them that will get you to do what they want done. And that's an automatic boundary broken. Mm-hmm. So there's a lot in that conversation, not just hers, but in this entire conversation. And I can value everybody's voices in this because we all have needs to be needed. We all have wants to be wanted. It helps us when we understand how then we can put things in place to create a different type of atmosphere, because the law of attraction is real. And so if that's all that you're thinking about, like those thoughts, if that's all you're seeing, then that does become your reality in that moment, but it still doesn't truthfully speak to what it is you need and want. That's just what they're putting out there.
Because we didn't get to the root of the problem.
We didn't get to the root of
If
the
we didn't get to
problem.
the root, then we're going to look at the surface of it all. But the root is where we really are. And we got to get to that place because there is a root to why we are, which is why I asked what we sow. Because what you sowed went into the ground and created a root. And now you are reaping that which was sown. So you got to get to the root to dig it up, pluck it up, whatever you got to do, so that you're not really swayed by the surface of what's going on around you. Okay? Anyone else?
I guess, I had to understand with my wanting to be accepted, and not the love part, but just be accepted, like other people and belong, that I was set apart. I wasn't meant to be like they is my sister, I guess, being accepted from my mom or my daddy, and that's what I had to learn, that I'm set apart. I'm different for a reason, because when I was, doing mine, and then I got myself together and I said, I'm gonna get out these streets. I'm gonna hang at home. I'm gonna raise my kids, because I was a young mom. And but as I was getting out the street and started going to church and finding the Lord and everything, my was just like me. And I said, I did that. I sowed that seed because that was me. That was me. I was fighting, and I had to, we sat down and we had a long conversation. Why, she called me sometime, such and such said this, such and such went here and they didn't even invite me. And I see that she have that thing of acceptance also that I had when I was growing up, and it rolled over into her, and I was like,
So did that come from a place of rejection?
yeah.
Because you said acceptance. But sometimes when we have been rejected, you use the word set yourself apart. But is it because of that rejection that you felt is the reason why you set yourself apart?
And sometimes we'll tell ourselves some good lies.
The best lies I ever told was to me.
Me too.
Exactly. They make you feel real warm
I
inside.
got this going on.
Yeah. But that's one of those things that we do to try to calm those things that we call emotions, by telling ourselves those things that make it all right. And sometimes it's okay for it not to be all right. It has to be okay, because, we know that learning takes place when disruption enters. You have to have some tension in place and be ready for that so that you can learn something different. Everything that we've discussed tonight, I don't want it to sound like, oh, it's just so terribly bad. Everything in these conversations, everything about what it was that we wanted, we needed, we didn't get, we didn't have, there is still time. We may have sown these particular seeds. We may have attracted these things. But when you know better, it's not just a euphemism. You do better. And you are able to correct some things, and you are able to better equip yourself to live a life to where when you say no, that's no. I'll never forget. And, this is not a promotion for Juanita Bynum, but I remember when she did No More Sheets with TD Jakes back in 1999. And she said that at that time she was broke, homeless, et cetera, et cetera. She said, but she carried herself in a manner in which when somebody looked at her, they thought twice about approaching her. She said she was not trying to attract certain people into her spaces. And that was the way she carried herself. Now, was she broken inside? Absolutely. She had had a terrible experience, but something clicked, though I'm using her words, something transitioned within her that said, you're worthy of so much more. You're worthy of so much more. But until you know that, you're going to keep getting what you're having. And it's no one's fault. We're not even going to blame you at this point. What we're going to say is, honey, time is waiting on you. Because if you want something different, you really do have to make the sacrifice to go on and get it. So I submit that to you all because we don't want anyone to leave this space thinking, oh, I'm doom and gloom. You still have time because you can go out in that garden, you can pull all that mess up, put it in a pile, burn it, and go get you some real potting soil with some good pH factor, and you can plant whatever you want to and stand there with your hands on your hip in your Wonder Woman pose and say, every good deed.
Mhm.
Okay, that's all.
That sounds good to me.
And that was the most important thing for me, was finding out who I am. Getting rid of all of that garbage and finding out what makes me tick. Not what make anybody else tick, what make me think the way I think, act the way I act. And that was very important to me because I didn't know who I was for a long time. I was what everybody said I was, but I didn't know who I was. But like I said, it was important to me to find out who I am and then had the self-acceptance to acknowledge it and move on.
Amen.
One of the things that helped me so much was the fact that you know, I understand that longing to be with someone because, you know, I've been married twice and, you know, that kind of thing. But but I had to look and, like you said, know who I was. And I looked at myself and I said, if I don't want to be with me, why would anybody else want to be? Until I am comfortable loving me, how can I look for love anywhere else?
I was gonna say, that is so very true because most of the time, like people could speak to you, they could be telling you how proud they are of you, they could be telling you this and that and the other about yourself, but until you start to believe it for yourself, none of that will really seem like it's true. Like if somebody telling you like, oh, you got so much going for yourself, like I could just see you gonna be something. You looking like, okay, you see this, I don't see none of this. Where you see that at? Because most of the time, many people will be like that. They'll be like, people be telling me this, that, and other, and I just don't know. But it's a reason why we don't know. Like it comes from what we've heard, how the projections other people have put on us, what they expected, the expectations most people desire us to have, like parents. If your parent desire you to be one thing, you want to do another thing, it's just like you'll feel like you failing because you're not doing what they expected or desire for you to do.
And is that sometimes because they're trying to live through you?
Yes,
Is that a possibility?
of course it is.
And so when I think about Truth Talk Thursday, my reality is that there are times we just need to be transparent. We need to make sure that we're transparent and we're not living in falsehood, that we're actually telling the truth, which is why we come to talk about the truth, what our truth is, and then find out what the truth of others is as well. And so everybody's truth is not the same. Everybody's truth is different, but it is important that we understand where you understand where you are, and then try and help yourself understand where someone else is coming from. It is Truth Talk Thursday. And so what I look at is that my boundaries help me to keep the good in, and my boundaries help me to keep the bad out. But I also have to understand this: if there's bad in me that I created for myself, I'm going to need you to open the gate, or myself to open the gate and let the bad out. I need to understand what that bad look like so that I can release that and continue to keep the good in. The older persons used to say that you need to eat the meat and spit out the bones. I don't know if some of us understand that, you young generation. But the key is you have to set some boundaries in place so you'll know how to do that. Thank you for tuning in with us to Truth Talk Thursday, dealing with boundaries. We will be here next week as well to go a little further in boundaries. But at this moment, we're going to allow our panelists to give us the last say so that they have. And we would like for you to know that we appreciate you signing in. We also appreciate the fact that you are here in person with us. But let us hear the last word from our panelists.
Well, just to say that boundaries for me are as necessary as water and air. And they are what keep me going in the right and proper direction.
And discussing these boundaries is really a learning experience for me. In a facility I was in, we dealt with boundaries, but we were just scratching it. To me, we were just scratching the surface. It's a lot deeper than what we had went into.
Boundaries to me are definitely important. And when I was asked to come up here today, my first thought was on good and bad out was like a cup of milk, right? And if you put that milk up on it and they say the milk is bad, and you put that milk up on a faucet and you start running water in it, which is the water is good. Some good and some bad gonna come out of it, but it's gonna be some good that comes out of it when you set those boundaries, and eventually that milk gonna come all the way out. But you got to keep on putting yourself around that good and practicing that good.
Okay.
I would say that like with boundaries, they definitely are necessary, but you have to get an understanding of what boundaries may look like for you. Because again, like we talked about earlier, you'll try to take what other people's boundaries may be and make them yours. But again, boundaries are personal. So you have to realize why you're setting that particular boundary for yourself and then keep that within place. And just stand firm on that boundary, regardless of what others may think or how they may feel.
I think boundaries are important in everyone's life. But the most important part about a boundary is understanding why it is in place, understanding what it looks like when it's in place, and what it looks like when it has lost its place. I did offer a couple of tools that I would give at the end. And one of those is to really gain some understanding about your emotional intelligence. Because in each one of those four quadrants, it starts with you having self-awareness about you. And then once you go through that process, you end with being able to have a relationship with others. I'll also add, there are two books that I have come to find very helpful. One is Boundaries by Dr. Townsend, and I'm sure we'll put these in the chat. And the other one is Boundaries, Finding Peace for Yourself. And that's by, she has a very interesting name, but it is, the last part of it is Tawwab.
Nidra Glover Tawwab.
There you go, Nidra Glover Tawwab. And so if you can get these two books, they come from different perspectives. Nidra's book is coming from a clinical perspective, as she is a clinical therapist. And so she has some interwoven thoughts on that. And Dr. Townsend's book, it has a spiritual perspective to it. He is utilizing scriptures to support what he's saying, and he's giving very clear and vivid examples of what it looks like, which was the example I gave about the mother who did not have the time, could not do it. So I encourage you to invest in yourself, spend time with yourself, and learn more about what it is that you need to operate in this society that is ever changing.
Again, thank you so very much. As I sit with who I am, as I begin to learn who I am, understand who I am, then I can make better choices. I can set the right type of boundaries because I now know who I am, but it is a process every single day. Traumatic experiences will cause me to think certain things, but once I sit in that and begin to process through those things, I can make a better decision for me. and set the boundaries in place. Thank you again for joining us this night of Truth Talk Thursday here at New Birth Fellowship of Praise, 1315 Linden Avenue, Griffin, Georgia, 30223. Have a wonderful evening, and thank you again. Panel, we appreciate you.